You are listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network.
Welcome to Scuderia F1, the podcast that's always up to speed with the latest Formula One news. Follow us on Twitter at Scuderia F1 Pod and subscribe to the show on iTunes and Stitcher. Now, here are your hosts, Mark Dailey and Kevin Laramee.
Welcome to Scuderia F1, the show that is always up to speed with Formula One. We're always up to speed, but Mark, for the first time in a long time, we kind of have a boring Grand Prix. Let's not lie to each other. You know, it wasn't the most exciting racing we've seen last Sunday.
No, sadly not. After a whole bunch of really exciting and really enjoyable Grand Prix throughout the entire year to date, this one was basically over by the first corner, and I think for the first time ever, we're hurting a little bit for material almost.
Exactly.
Because I hate to sometimes, I mean, I exaggerate. That's kind of a thing that I do, but when I say that race was over by the time they got into turn one, that's not really too much of an exaggeration this time.
No, and you know, if you dissect Lewis Hamilton's comments, because that's something you have to learn how to do if you want to get anything out of what he's saying, because he speaks in codes and he never goes into deep. He always brushes the surface, and he mentions that he was doing stuff on his steering wheel to do stuff to his car. So, reading between the lines, he was able to manage his engine because he only has that one for the rest of the season. So, he has to manage it best as possible. And that's what he was doing, managing time gaps, managing engine, going dial to dial. He wasn't necessarily bothered by fastest lap. Kimi Räikkönen got the DHL fastest lap in this race, but he wasn't bothered by trying to equivalate that lap or anything because he wanted to save his engine. So after the first lap, where he took over the lead, got first, Nico got stuck behind the two Red Bulls and eventually ended up for, first of all, great start by the Red Bulls, both Max and Daniel Ricciardo. Great first turn, and it was good racing, clean racing. What do you think about that first turn, Mark?
Well, it was interesting because as we've seen many times this year, that it would be Hamilton that may not have had the better of the starts of the two Mercedes. But this time it seemed that it was Rosberg who was a little bit off the line, slower compared to Hamilton. And then when they got down into turn one, they were, well, basically three abreast, and then Rosberg was just behind one of the Red Bulls momentarily, but did very well to get back around and back into P2, because if he didn't, he would have been much further behind and lost, I think, a lot of ground to Hamilton. I mean, he pretty well stuck with Lewis, I think, within a couple of seconds throughout the entire Grand Prix, but I think if he got stuck behind either Ricciardo or Verstappen at the start there, that he would have been well down and much further away from his teammate.
Yeah, and you know, if you want to mention this race, and we mentioned how it wasn't maybe a non-exciting race, let's take Mercedes out of the equation. The Raikkonen-Verstappen duel was interesting. Ricciardo or podium, a kind of a not a redemption, but for him, this felt good because a lot of talk about his teammate, not about him lately. So for him to beat Verstappen on the track and able to finish third, it's a good feeling for Ricciardo. So you have that question, and clearly now they're close in the Constructor Championship, but Red Bull, at least on the track, and they're only 1 point away, they're clearly overtaking Ferrari as the second best car in the peloton.
Well, that is a very, very good point. And yeah, as you mentioned, it was good to see Ricciardo get onto the podium again, because ever since Verstappen won the Spanish Grand Prix a couple of months ago, it has basically been all Max this, all Max that, and he's been proving it on the track and outperforming his teammate. So from that point of view, it was good for Ricciardo to outpace him and get that P3 in the race. But it is true, they definitely have overtaken Ferrari, who have said, or Maurizio Arrivabene from Ferrari has basically been begging their critics and detractors to let them, quote, work in peace, end quotes, to sort out the problems that they're having, because they've been a real disappointment. Because coming into the season, there was talk that they were within a tenth of a second, I believe it was, of Mercedes, and they looked like they were going to be able to challenge them early on, and it just seems that slowly over each and every race weekend, they just seem to be falling that little bit further behind. Of course, they've had some circumstances go against them, obviously, Vettel and Danny Kvyat have become very well acquainted over the course of this season.
It feels like it's ages ago, though. It feels like it's another season ago.
It does, doesn't it? But
it's
that was just one of the things that they've been dealing with is, Sebastian being crashed out, being hit by Kvyat in Russia, and then just a couple of weeks ago he had that puncture on the straightaway in Austria, and then at other times they've just miscalculated when they should do their pit stops and just some of the strategy things, and they just really have not risen to what a lot of us have expected of them this year.
No, exactly. And one thing that it really does show this for Ferrari is the amount of swearing that Vettel is doing on the radio now. It's kind of become a running joke now in the circles of F1. He's used to be such a clean guy, such a nice guy, and maybe he hang out with the English of Red Bulls for too long and caught quite a dirty mouth with it. But now on the radio for Ferrari, he's been more and more like losing his temper. It's never directed towards teams. It's usually directed to a driver that's slower in front of him and it's not moving away. Example, on Sunday, many times there was, I can't remember the driver in front of him, but he needed to overtake him. He was a lap down and the guy just wouldn't get out of the way. So he was losing ground to the guy in front of him, Vettel, because of this, and he was losing his mind, and it was beginning, because he was asked a question after the race, well, why were you swearing that much? Well, I wasn't in the beginning of the conversation, but you just clipped that part. You just clipped the part of me saying, beep, 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 get out of my way. But I was asking nicely at the beginning, but he was not cooperating. But there's that aspect, that there's a, not necessarily temper, it's flair, but a little lack of patience that is slowly brewing. Maybe not with Vettel, but like you mentioned with the supporters. But people are expecting more out of this car. And to be quite honest, the engine they do have, they should get more out of this car. And I think that's why people are disappointed. Is we see in this engine, we know the data that we can get that Ferrari gives during races. We see the speeds they can get. We should and we have to expect more out of this car.
Well, the interesting thing, too, about Ferrari is just compare them to Red Bull. And Christian Horner said the other day that they reckon that the Renault, or the Tag Heuer branded Renault engine that's in the back of this year's Red Bull, has something between 45 and 50 brake horsepower less than the engine that is in the back of Rosberg's or Hamilton's Mercedes. So that's substantial, but yet Ferrari is supposed to have more power. They're supposed to be closer to Mercedes, but it's Red Bull that's outperforming them on the track. So that one thing that tells me is that they're getting more out of what they have. And the other thing that was interesting too about what Horner was saying is that there are no more big upgrades to come on this engine this year. There are some things that they can do to boost the performance and get a little bit more about what they have right now.
Yeah, like a better efficiency out of the group they have together, yes.
Yeah. So basically what they have is what they're going to get for the rest of the season. So there'll be some little gains here and there, but it is very interesting considering how basically this time last year it was almost the reverse situation. It was Ferrari seemed to be getting a little bit better, and then it was Red Bull that was having all the problems with the engines, and there was that whole schism that they had with Renault and how they were going to drop them, and they were even talking about leaving Formula One about this time last year. Not that Ferrari's threatening to leave Formula One. Well, they're not threatened to leave right now, but you never know with them. That sometimes comes out in the course of conversations. But it seems that the two teams have completely reversed roles in 2016.
No, exactly. And when you look at and you mentioned car upgrades, there's a lot of transition that is happening right now with developing team in every single team in the F1 that are slowly focusing on next year. With the amount of change in regulation and rules and schematics of the car for 2017, some research and development is needed, and some part of teams are refocused on that aspect of development for next year. Not a lot, but some. It's like you mentioned, the engine itself is not going to have a lot of upgrade, but the rest surrounding the engine will be more based to get more out of the same engine. So that's going to be important for Red Bull because, as much as Ferrari seems like they're going backwards right now, I wouldn't be surprised if in a month and a half, 2 months, maybe they're going to see the climb back factor if they can, like they say, work in peace.
Yeah, and also what with the summer break coming up after the German Grand Prix this weekend, they'll have 3 weeks. I wonder if we're going to see something similar at Ferrari like we saw at McLaren over the winter months, where they basically went from the end of last season straight through into the beginning of this season to get the car ready for 2016. So I wonder how much extra time and how many hours will be put into that Ferrari over that 3 week period to try and claw back some performance, try and get back some respectability, if you want to call it that, and get some results, because we have officially passed the 50% marker, the halfway marker in this record long Formula One season. But when we come back at the end of August, there's still 9 races to go. So there are a lot of points for everybody. I mean, obviously, the Drivers' Championship is going to come down between Rosberg and Hamilton, and then probably most likely the constructors' title as well is most likely Mercedes to lose. But
I think
all the other teams, there's definitely plenty to fight for.
No, and I think it's like you mentioned, the constructors' championship. I think 373. Or something similar to that for Mercedes, like 90-something point, if not even more than that, ahead of Ferrari. And Red Bull is just 1 point behind Ferrari. So, no, that championship is done and dusted. For the driver, it's going to be between Hamilton and Rosberg, let's face it. But there's 1 point difference. Hamilton isn't the lead. We go back a month ago, it was 43 points for Rosberg. A lot of things changed in a month, Mark.
Well, definitely. I think the big ones for Nico Rosberg was obviously in Monaco when he didn't do so well. Montreal, he didn't do so well. So there were a couple of races there where Hamilton was really able to maximize the points that he was getting. And then, well, obviously Spain, they both canceled each other out when they crashed on the third corner of the opening lap. But you know, even though that Hamilton is in front of his teammate now, the gap is only 6 points. So it'll be very interesting to see what happens this weekend in Germany, because Formula One is all about momentum. And obviously, Lewis had the momentum, I think, all the way from Spa 2014 when he won the championship that year. And he had the momentum basically all the way to last year, I would say, to the U.S. Grand Prix at Austin, where he and Nico banged wheels at the first corner. And then after that, the next week, they went to Mexico. And then that's when Rosberg began this phenomenal run of form and won. What did he win? Was it 5-6 Grand Prix from last year to this year?
Yeah, it was 6. He was going to 7th for the record and failed in the 7th.
Yeah, that's right. You're correct. And then slowly but surely, like Hamilton, he did obviously have quite a few problems. It'll be tough to say what happens, because at some point he's going to have, you have to think that he's going to have some component that's going to have to be replaced in his engine. I mean, like you say, he's already on to his 5th and final one of the year, and with 9 races to go, it seems inconceivable that he's going to make that one engine last 9 races. But at the moment, the last several races and the last several weeks, the momentum has come back to Hamilton, and we'll just have to see how long he's able to maintain it going forward.
One race between 2 drivers that was really interesting during that actual race was Kimi Räikkönen and Max Verstappen. This was very interesting. Max Verstappen was investigated after as well by the stewards, and it was interesting to see if he actually changed direction a couple times during the battle with the corner with Räikkönen later in the race. You know, it was a really fair battle, and you know, people say he changed twice direction, but if he didn't do so, both cars would have come off the track. They would have touched more severely than they actually did. They just barely touched, and just a part of Kimi Räikkönen's front wing disintegrated, but outside of that, both cars were able to finish with no problem. So if Max did not do that move, both cars probably would have ran into each other a lot more severely.
Yeah, but the thing is too, and yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying. But the other thing is too that Verstappen, although he is only 18, he does know how to drive well, and he does know how to defend the position well. Let's just go dial it back here a couple of weeks to the Grand Prix of Montreal, when he had Nico Rosberg breathing down his neck for many, many laps at the end of the race there. And when he just got into that final chicane just right before the Wall of Champions there, that's where Nico had a look many times on Verstappen. And that was the one part of the track where he was really able to get into position to really make a pass on the Red Bull. But time after time, we saw Verstappen just position his car just the correct way and defend the position well. And at the end of it, what happened? Well, it was Rosberg that got a little bit desperate to try and get around him. He probably was faster than Max in the Red Bull, but he just got frustrated and just trying to get as many points as he possibly could, made a bit of a desperation move, and ended up losing control of the car and lost just he couldn't keep control of it, and Max just kept doing his thing. So I don't know. For a young guy, he's very calm and composed when he has like another faster car or a more experienced driver chasing him down, and he doesn't seem to be bothered by it at all.
No, exactly. So it's going to be fascinating to see how Verstappen continues to grow in the Red Bull car. This year is quite impressive. He's gone from a Toro Rosso driver to a Red Bull driver, already a race winner, the youngest in Formula One history. And now Daniel Ricciardo, though, for him, this podium is not necessarily redemption, but for him, it's what I would say maybe a perspective to things to come. He feels like he needs to prove himself once again, and that presence of Max Verstappen with Red Bull will push Ricciardo to do better. And you know what's going to happen? The car will get better because of this, because of both work. They're able to marginally gain half a fraction of a second here and there, and altogether, both cars, both pilots should be better just because of that competition that seems to be brewing between the two. And to be fair, it's a clean competition because Max is so happy-go-lucky. Hey, I'm here. I'm just happy to race. I'm happy to be in this car. I'm happy to do the best I can. And he's always very respectful to Ricciardo. But Ricciardo still, to take a quite literal expression, he's got that fire lit on him.
Well, and the other thing is, too, that just building on what you're saying there, that Verstappen just seems very excited and happy to be there. I think that definitely that's part of it, but I think that he feels less pressure than Ricciardo. I think Ricciardo, is quite pressured having a driver that is as good as, or perhaps even better than he is, and who's a whole lot younger than he is himself. So I think we've really seen it. Of course, Ricciardo did have some bad luck there. If we're really fair, we could probably make the case that he probably should have won the Grand Prix in Monaco if his team hadn't bungled that one pit stop. Obviously, there's many factors that could have come into play that could have prevented him from winning that race, but considering that it was Hamilton that snuck that one, that I think really knocked the wind out of his sails. And then also, I think he felt cheated the race before that in Spain, where he had the puncture, and then it was his teammate that went to go and get all the applause, all the praise for winning that and becoming Formula One's youngest ever Grand Prix winner. But I think that's a result that he needs, because you have to start wondering at some point, does he start to question his own ability? If he keeps race in, race out, he's the one that's finishing behind Verstappen on the track. And I think that he was much better than Verstappen on the day as well. Of course, Hungary's a bit of a strange circuit. It's got plenty of straightaways and corners, but there aren't really too many opportunities to pass. So it's one of those tracks that you either have to hope you'll move up through the order because somebody has a mechanical failure and they just are just not on the track, or that you're going to pick up some positions through pit stops. And obviously that kind of leads into another discussion about the driver of the day. And I think starting in P14 and then ending up in P6, the driver of the day has to be Kimi Räikkönen.
Oh, absolutely. Great ride by Kimi Räikkönen. And his battles with Max Verstappen, he could have been even better if things weren't to his way. He could have maybe challenged for a podium spot and got behind maybe Ricciardo because he was that fast. He got maybe unlucky with the touch with Verstappen near the end, but Kimi Räikkönen did quite a remarkable race, able to overtake some cars on this circuit. Maybe the only one that were able to do so in this race. No, great drive by Kimi Räikkönen for Ferrari.
Yeah, and I don't know, the whole Hungaroring it's a bit of an odd track because there are corners, both fast and slow and medium speeds, but there just aren't very many opportunities to pass. And I think that's
not necessarily wide enough, and it's the angles of the corners that are not necessarily good for overtaking.
Exactly, yeah.
The one that you have that you would like, it's like the kind of a hairpin. It's not an hairpin enough to give you enough space to cut in, and you come out of it too quickly to actually make your move stick. So no, there's a couple of places to do so, but only if you really have better pace than the other car. Otherwise, you're not going to overtake them. Like if you're Mercedes, you're going to overtake it. If you're Ferrari, you'll overtake a Williams, but you're not going to be able to overtake any car if you're similar speed.
Well, exactly. If you go and look at the final results, that you see Lewis Hamilton, who obviously won, Nico Rosberg was only 1.97 seconds behind his teammate. And that's basically where he was the entire race. Just maybe close, but not quite close enough to get DRS all the time, and definitely not close enough to try and get close enough to try and make a pass on his teammate. I kind of hate to go back and say that it was all over at the first corner. I mean, that's kind of where this discussion started, but
it kind of was.
It kind of was. And it's just a little bit disappointing because over the years there's been many races like that on that track. I mean, it's a very nice looking track. It's a nice setting and everything, but it's just far too often there's been too many rather boring and rather forgettable Grand Prix there.
The track was designed and built when cars are not what cars are today.
Yeah.
So in a way, you can understand that the track wasn't designed to have an interesting kind of race with those type of cars. It was designed to have interesting kind of race with cars from the late 80s. So that's the biggest difference as well with old tracks is they're not necessarily conducive to having entertaining race with those type of cars.
Well, yeah, I mean, you look at some other traditional tracks. We'll take the ones that form nice bookends to the Hungarian Grand Prix. You have the British Grand Prix at Silverstone, and then you have the German Grand Prix coming up at Hockenheim. Both of those are older tracks that have undergone substantial and significant changes over the years. Hockenheim is quite different now than it was even 10 years ago. And so I went to Hockenheim, it was probably the early 2000s, to watch a DTM race. And basically you had where they'd come into the stadium section, go through that sort of twisty bit, then onto the main straight, you go into that right-hander, that long straight, and they disappear for a couple of minutes. And now they've cleared out the forest and they've completely reworked that track. And the same thing with Silverstone. Silverstone is set on the site of a World War II bomber base. And basically after the war, they started racing there on the old runways, and out of that evolved the racetrack. But obviously the tarmac, the asphalt that is there now is a lot different and has evolved quite a bit from the track that was there in the 1940s, the 1950s, and it has undergone quite a few changes. And some of these older tracks, they have evolved to make the tracks, to make the racing more enjoyable. But the Hungaroring is just, apart from maybe getting a new coat of asphalt.
Exactly. I was going to mention they have a brand new coat of asphalt for this year, and that what it made it even more slippery, because we didn't talk about this yet, but the qualification was, I don't swear a lot in this show. But it was a shit show, the qualification in this race, because Q1 took about an hour and 15 minutes to get done. 3 or 4 red flags, I think. Cars were just slipping out, and because it was rainy, then it was getting dry. A couple of rain again, dry, rain, dry, rain, and then the track itself, because it's new, when it rains, it seeps all the oil out of the track because there's a lot of oil still in that track because it's brand new. When the tarmac's been there for 20 years, it seeped all the oil a long time ago, and it's all dried up and has a different type of grip. When it gets slippery or a little bit humid like it was during the qualification, this track was really slippery, and we've seen cars slip off track here and there.
Yeah, and it's again, I don't want to be too negative or pessimistic, but it's a little bit, I wouldn't say ironic, but definitely gives you a little bit of perspective on how uneventful the race actually was when you go back to think that or reflect on the qualifying and just how much was going on through the 3 qualifying sessions compared to the race itself. So that kind of puts a little bit of perspective on it. But when you look at the starting grid, it does make things a little bit interesting when you see like a car like a Ferrari or a Williams that maybe have caught out when the conditions weren't the best, and how under normal circumstances that it could make for quite an interesting scenario, like once the Grand Prix gets going and some of these faster cars start carving their way through the fields and catching up to the more evenly matched cars. So that's why I think it's even more impressive that Kimi Räikkönen managed to get up to sixth place from where he was starting in 14th. But just talking about 7th place now, that was taken by Fernando Alonso in the McLaren, which I think they had a pretty good weekend for themselves. Well, maybe
I thought Jenson Button
did.
Yes. Well, let's just go to Jenson Button quickly, and we'll go back to Alonso after. And Jenson Button received the drive-through penalty because the rules changed. Now when you have a radio communication that you're not supposed to, you're going to get a drive-through penalty. And, they figured out a way, too, that if you have to tell something to your driver that is race-threatening and you need to tell him, you need to make him pit, and you can tell him whatever you want when he's pitting. There, live in person, you're allowed to do so. So that's the new rule. But that's not what they had. They had a hydraulic problem for Jenson Button, where he could not brake and the gas pedal was defectuous as well. He was stuck in 7th gear and he couldn't change it, and they didn't want him to change as well because he was going to lose the entire gearbox. So for Jenson Button, they mentioned this on the radio, and he got a drive-through penalty as a penalty for the radio communication that he was not supposed to have.
Which is a bit stupid when you think about it, because
if
you have a problem with the gearbox and you go and change the gearbox, you're going to get a 5-place grid penalty for the next Grand Prix. So he's going to have that problem, and then he's got a penalty because he's received an illegal message that if he does shift, then he's going to spray the gears all over the track when the gearbox explodes. But I don't know. I just think that they're not striking that happy medium. Of course, they're trying to put more back into the hands of the drivers, that if there's any problems, and maybe, I don't know if you want to call it, create more of a spectacle, but we saw a couple of weeks ago at the European Grand Prix in Baku that Hamilton had a problem with the engine mapping, and he wasn't able to figure it out for a long time. He eventually did figure it out, but it just doesn't really make a lot of sense. And then also, Nico Rosberg was faced with a very similar situation just 2 weeks ago in Great Britain, when right at the end of the race, he was sticking in one gear as well, and he was told not to shift as well, and he was given that 5-second penalty, which ultimately bumped him down from P2 to P3. So that did cost him something there. But just like with Button, when it comes to a technical issue like that could actually damage the car and then cost the guy 5 grid places on the grid at the next race, it just seems illogical, especially in the scenario of modern Formula One, that they're trying to be, they have these measures in place for the cost cutting, and just trying to keep a lid on things like that, so teams aren't using unlimited resources on engines and gearboxes and things like that. So I don't know. I just think that there is a way to do it if they want to have these more, I guess, these stricter radio rules. But
you have a stricter radio rules. Don't make cars that have to be handled the way they have to be handled right now. And that's one of the pilot. And I think it's Jenson Button. I'm not sure. But I think it is. And Jenson Button, if he is, I might be mistaken. So just say AF1 driver mentioned. I can agree with what you're saying. But you're the one who designed the cars this way, and you told the team the cars need to be like this, with the steering wheel complicated like this, and all those different engine mapping, like you mentioned, and those 3 dials with 10 different combinations on each dial. That's thousands of combinations. And you're the ones who made the cars like this. So you're the one who actually created the demand of, we need more than one guy to actually be able to handle those cars and to get in the right mode at the right time. It's very difficult. It's very complicated. So why not just go put just a regular engine drivetrain, just regular mechanical parts, and let the guy drive? Fine. But if you want cars to be like this, you kind of have to let him get not help, but like get support.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's not like the 1980s where you had just
It's
had
just a shaft. Like you have two pedals and a gear shaft.
Clutch, brake pedal, gas pedal, and a gear shift, and that was about
That's
it. I mean, when they went through that
blade.
technological leap forward in the 90s to where a lot of these technologies first started to get pioneered and brought into the cars, it obviously changed things around. But yeah, I mean, be realistic about it. If the cars are going to be this technical and there's so many things that can go wrong, because what did they say that for Hamilton's problem in Baku, what was there, something like 300 potential settings that he could switch through
easily
before to get the correct engine mapping setting? I mean, yeah, these guys are smart and they know what to do, but
it's more than that.
That's a tough order for anyone.
There's 3 dials, and the smallest dial has 10, and I think the other one has 10 as well, and the third one I think has 12, depending on which driver it is or which team it is. So just 3 times, it's not times, it's 3 square 10. That's a lot of combinations. That's like in the thousands.
Yeah.
So it's mind-boggling, and that's what was taking a lot of time for Lewis Hamilton, because he was saving his engine. So he was going through the motions of finding the right one, remembering which one. And it's easy when you know you have to save your engine. In the morning, you already studied, all right, I need to remember those 4 settings, because those 4, I'm just spitballing here, but those 4 settings would be to save my engine. So today I need to remember those 4 ones. It's fine. But when you have things that happen that you're not expecting, unexpected break or all that, that's when you actually should be able to have that support. And on the broadcast, I talk about that joker maybe having the once. They do have it now, but you have a penalty as well for doing it, because you have to make literally an extra pit stop. You have to come in the pit and they'll tell you, okay, you can do this to fix your car, and then you're on your way. But it's still a penalty to do so, because you have to come into pit.
Yeah, definitely, because I don't know how they can expect guys to go out there, race, try and fix these things, and react to things that are happening on the track in a split second, and still be able to try and sort out some of these technical issues. Obviously, I can understand why Button was really frustrated, and you could just hear it in his voice on some of the race radio. Didn't he say it was going to be something that was shaping up to be the race from hell? I mean, obviously he was one of the cars that actually didn't finish the race.
You know what Jensen mentioned, to be fair, sorry to interrupt, Mark.
No, that's all right.
He mentioned, he's like, they say we're not supposed to talk about stuff like this if it's not safety. Don't they know that not having brake is not safe?
Well, yeah, that's a very good point. These cars go 200 miles an hour. You got to slow them down somehow. Yeah,
he's like, I don't understand that they don't realize that it's about safety. That was Jensen Button's reaction on the radio during the race when they told him that, okay, Jensen, you have to come in for a penalty in the box.
Another one of the Formula One rules head scratchers. But, well, I don't know. I don't think there's really too much more we can say about this race. Obviously, going to Germany this week, there's going to be, well, I guess basically the same continuation in the storylines that we've been talking about for the last couple of months. I think, of course, we're going to be looking very carefully at Rosberg and Hamilton and be watching that battle quite intently. And then from there on down, I guess it'll be interesting to see if Ferrari can find something over this this week. It seems a bit of a stretch to maybe expect anything big, considering you have 1 week between Hungary and Germany. But I guess as the crow flies, the two countries aren't that far apart. So who knows if they'll be able to sort something out for this weekend.
Exactly. No, they need to find like a half a second for Ferrari to be competitive with Red Bull, and like a whole second to even get closer if they can. But the encouraging factor as well coming out of Hungary is the difference between Mercedes and Red Bull is there still, but it's smaller day by day. And there's still a little bit of hope that maybe Red Bull, depending on the circuit, sometimes they can keep up with them.
Yeah, well, we'll see. Like I say, it's hard to be really overly positive about what's happening at Ferrari at the moment, but They could find something. Obviously, they've got a pair of very good drivers there. Well, I guess you could make the same argument for Red Bull and obviously Mercedes as well, and also Williams. They're all kind of in that same group. But Ferrari, just for me, it remains a head scratcher, and I don't know I don't know really what to expect from them. I would be very surprised if they really find lightning in a bottle for this race, and I would think if they end up behind Red Bull again at this race, that I don't think we should be sitting here in a week from now saying.
But I was mentioning though the difference between Red Bull and Mercedes.
Yeah,
that's what I was saying, that it's getting smaller, and not about Ferrari. So between Red Bull and Mercedes, it's getting a lot closer. In the qualification process, when both cars were on the same type of track, you were talking about 3/10 of a second. And that's about 1 second fastest than the track before. So there is some improvement on Red Bull's part. So at least for the rest of the season, there's small hope that Red Bull will get closer to Mercedes.
Yeah, and that is a very good point. Sorry, I was looking at my notes here, and I got Ferrari on the brain. They've been such a conundrum to me lately. But yeah, that is very good. A very good point that you make, and it will be very interesting to see what more performances that they can get out of their cars, because at some point, I guess teams may start to focus more on 2017. But while there's still a lot to be fought for in this year, because I mean, obviously next year's going to be a completely new formula and a completely different, well, basically everything for next year. It'll be interesting to see who really sticks with it and who maybe abandons things, because I believe Force India is already, they've basically developed the car as far as it's going to go for this year, and all the focus they're putting into next year's car. But it would be kind of cool to see Red Bull get a little bit closer to Mercedes and push them, because we've seen again the last several races that the Mercedes is just dominating. Yeah. And obviously, Verstappen had a little bit of good fortune in Austria when Hamilton and Rosberg collided there to get on the second step of the podium. But a lot of the times when you get a Mercedes or two out in the front there, they just disappear, and we saw that again this past weekend. I mean, there was only 2 seconds between Rosberg and Hamilton, and then behind Nico was another 26 or 27 seconds before you got to Ricciardo.
And then everybody else basically was lapped. So. Yeah,
exactly. Beyond P6 after Raikkonen, everybody was a lap down. That's true.
So you know what? Hamilton is still the car that overtaken the most amount of cars on that track on Sunday, because he basically took a lap off 15 cars.
Yeah, and that's true. But Raikkonen found a way to get around 8 cars and get into P6. So it just proves that you can pass there if you want to. So I think a lot of it does come down to the drivers and how bad they really want it, and how much they're really willing to drive through the dirty air and maybe lose a bit of performance and just try and do anything they can to make an overtaking maneuver on the car in front of them. So hopefully we'll see some more overtaking and more excitement in Germany this weekend, and Hockenheim should provide a little bit better circumstances for racing than Hungary for sure.
Exactly. I was going to make a little topo about the logistic of F1, but I'll do a little teaser, and I will do it on next week's show, because we do have a Grand Prix this weekend. You ever wondered how, and don't Google it till next week, wait till I tell you the story. You don't have to Google it till next week. I know it's easy to get information nowadays, but wait till I tell you the story next week's show. But have you ever wondered how, in such a small timetable, they're able to have the same amount of pit walls and all the technology, the infrastructures of every team, be able to be looking the same and everything at the same place all across the world in such a short amount of time? In next week's show, I will explain to you how it is all possible. And no, it has nothing to do with magic.
Well, there's going to be some kind of magic, or a lot of hard work, or
a
just
little bit
being
of both.
Really smart with your resources.
It's a lot of the latter. But Mark, we have a German Grand Prix coming up, and maybe Lewis Hamilton has a chance to stamp his authority on the Drivers' Championship, or Nico with his home Grand Prix can retake the lead if he does the performance that he wants to.
Yeah, and it's going to be really exciting to watch, and I think definitely eyes are going to be on Rosberg and Hamilton, and because if Rosberg can pull back something here, then he'll take the advantage again. But if he stumbles or things don't go his way, then there's the opportunity for Hamilton there, if he wins this race, to bust this one wide open. And then all of a sudden we might be talking about, well, remember at the beginning of the year, it was 43 points from Rosberg to Hamilton, but now look, it's, he's 25, so it could be perhaps a 31-point gap if Rosberg fails to collect any points and Hamilton collects maximum points. So there's a lot on the line. This is a big race coming up for sure.
Absolutely, Mark. So we'll say goodbye for this week. You can visit the Sports Podcasting Network to make sure you never miss a show of the network. We're talking about what's the score of the sports news quiz, Scuderia F1, obviously Hardwood Radio, and live Monday to Friday, Soccer Today, your live radio show that covers the world of football with a soccer perspective. For Mark Dailey, I'm Kevin Laramee, and until next time, have a great F1.
Thanks for listening to the Scuderia F1 podcast. If you want to get the show notes for this episode, then head over to ScuderiaF1pod.com. Want to get in touch with us? Then email us at ScuderiaF1pod@gmail.com.
You were listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us, sportspodcastingnetwork.com.